Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. I hope you guys are having a great day. Today we're starting off in the skeleton and spider spawner that we converted in the last episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I am so glad that we have this whole thing set up. I've been killing skeletons for the bones, for the XP. I've got 53 levels. All of my tools are pretty much repaired except for the ones that don't have mending on them right now. And I have more arrows and bows than I know what to do with. The bones, I absolutely know what I'm going to do with those, so I'm going to take some of those away with me, and look at that, some more bows are creeping into the system. I'm just going to try and keep those slots of this chest filled up with bones so that no other items can get in, but sooner or later that's going to backlog the hopper down there, so we might have to expand the storage in here. As you can see, I've been doing a little bit of decorating. I've been just kind of peppering the ceiling with like textural blocks, stuff that gives this place a little bit of flavor, kind of makes it feel like it's all run down. I actually kept the supports from that abandoned mine shaft, which is still behind here, and we could still go and explore a bit more of that at some point if we want to. Over here, I've actually kept a bit of line of sight for that spawner, just so I can check that the lights are off and everything is working well. I also couldn't really work around the redstone being there leading up to this block, and there are probably ways around that, but I didn't feel like doing it. I felt like it was justified to kind of keep that gap up there open, and nothing should be able to get through there anyway unless it's a cave spider, which shouldn't be spawning outside of this room and the one beyond this wall anyway. But for now, I'm going to switch the skeleton spawner off, and once we got outside of this mossy cobblestone area, it probably wouldn't have given us any more skeletons anyway. But I think now is the time to leave this place, much as it is kind of awesome right now. In fact, I might work a little bit on the entrance and exit to this place before we go, because right now all I've got is a ladder. And ladders, while they are kind of good, while it is nice to have ladders to kind of control getting in and out of a place, it does tend to make things a little bit slow. Like, as far as transport in Minecraft goes, ladders are useful for what they are, but they're not the best way of getting in and out of something. The best way is probably to use water, and you saw in the last episode that we could create these bubble columns that allow you to transport vertically very, very fast, or at least they can transport you upwards very fast. The other columns using magma blocks will transport you down. They'll kind of suck you down into wherever the magma block is taking you, but the problem with those is that you take damage on the magma block if you're not holding shift or wearing frost walker boots, which creates a completely different problem for water. And it's actually not as fast as you can possibly fall, because you can fall basically at the Minecraft equivalent of terminal velocity very, very easily. And there are very simple ways of making sure you don't take damage at the bottom of a fall. So before we go anywhere, we are going to start off this episode by arranging a bubble column in here and getting ourselves a nice, safe water drop. For that, I'm actually going to need my fireworks, because I'm going to fly out to a place where we can find an ocean. The main reason for that being so that we can find some kelp. Kelp is a really useful thing when it comes to creating water columns. Oh, by the way, I can show you a nice trick with ladders if we've got our fireworks on us. If you're moving downwards on a ladder and you've got elytra on, press space and you will drop very, very fast, because your wings will open and you'll actually kind of fly down the ladder a little bit. But you can use ladders as a takeoff platform that way. It's kind of cool. Anyway, let's quickly find an ocean so that we can track down some kelp, which we won't find growing in the swamps in the same way that we've got seagrass and stuff growing around here. You actually need an ocean biome for kelp to be present, so I'm not certain where the nearest one is, actually. Let me see if I can fly out this way, because I think this might lead towards an ocean sooner or later. Yeah, here we go, there's one, a little bit further away than I intended to go, but that's not a problem. So these large plants you'll see growing up from the bottom of the ocean here are kelp, and if we take out one of the bottoms of these, they all break all the way up to the surface, much in the same way that things like sugarcane and cactus do. So having cleared some space in my inventory, I need to get about a stack of this stuff, and we're going to be able to farm this later. In fact, farming it is probably going to be a really good idea for reasons I will explain in future. But for now, we'll go with about a stack. I think that should be enough to get us up from the skeleton and spider spawner to the surface. So to create our bubble column leading upwards, I'm actually going to stand on top of these ladders and take them all out as we go down, because we won't need these anymore once the bubble column is installed. The problem with the bubble columns primarily is that you need a little bit of space at the bottom here to block the water off. Much like we did with the blocking of water in the spawners themselves, we need to put a couple of blocks around here. Hello, what is... Hey, what are you doing outside of the spawner? Come here, you. I think that guy may have wandered in from the section down here that isn't completely lit. But here we go. We need to block off some sections of this here to make sure that the water doesn't flood out into the hallway here. And that's going to be fairly simple to do. We can do that with some blocks like fences, for example. When it comes to the last two blocks, the blocks that as a player you will have to step out of, I like using a pressure plate and a fence gate on top of it, because you can walk onto the pressure plate like so. The gate will open, allowing you through, or you can step in through the side like so. But both of these blocks will block water. The pressure plate is one of the few things that as a redstone component will not actually be washed away when you place water next to it. So that's a good one to remember. Now, as far as creating a column up here goes, you're going to need a lot of water sources for that, and that is why we brought the kelp, because kelp has a very interesting property, which I'll explain in just a second once I've found the soul sand. Yes, there we go. Kelp has the interesting property of being able to convert flowing water into a full water source. So take, for example, here, this section here. I've got a single water source there that is flowing downwards, and if I were to create a soul sand bubble column underneath this, it would not be possible to use this as a bubble column because the downwards flowing water is preventing this from converting into a bubble column. Remember, a bubble column has to have water sources going all the way up. I've actually removed the soul sand for a second and put the block of stone back there because kelp has to grow on full-size blocks. But once we put the kelp up here, you'll see that the water texture is still flowing downwards, but when we remove that, it should all convert into regular source blocks. And now I'll pop the soul sand under here as an example. There we go, we have a bubble column. And that didn't look like it converted into water source blocks, but it did. So now to place water sources up the entirety of this shaft here, what we need to do is get back up to the surface and place a bucket of water there, which is going to flow downwards into that place we just reserved for it. We need to swim down, which takes a little while, but luckily we've got respiration, so we don't need to worry too much about that. The water finishes flowing to the bottom here and is contained by the blocks we've placed around it, and all we got to do is swap out this soul sand for kelp and then build a tower of kelp all the way back up to the surface from here. And that's nice and simple to do. We just need to swim upwards, holding down right click as we go to place more kelp. And now we dive back down to the bottom here, take that kelp out, and replace the bottom block here with a block of soul sand. And then after that, what we have is a bubble column that will take us all the way up to the surface very, very quickly. Now, next to this, I have actually started digging out a tunnel for a safe water drop, and for that, we are going to need a sign and a bucket of water, and that is it. So let me quickly take the coordinates of this so we can head back up to the surface, 28 and 604. Okay, cool. Let me head up to the surface really fast, and you'll notice this is much faster than climbing a ladder right at the top, and we collected up all our kelp again. Brilliant. So 1028 and 604, that is coming down about here. So we will need to block this off with a block of grass, for example, and then we'll dig straight down if we can. Now, I do want to be a little bit careful that we don't drop into lava here with digging straight down. It's always a bit of a problem. So let me just quickly grab a bucket of water, and we will keep our wits about us as we dig down. Remember, lava lakes don't just generate at the bottom of the world, they can generate a little bit higher up, so when you're digging down like this, you got to be very, very careful that you don't end up in a cave with a lava lake or anything like that. Oh, there's some iron here. You know what, we may as well do a slightly safer method and dig down whilst standing on the block next to it, and that way we can basically fill this back in as we go, just so we can make sure that we don't fall down into lava or anything that we're not supposed to fall down into. There we go, we managed to get our fall, and I can probably take these last few blocks worth of fall damage, not to worry. Now, to set up a safe fall, all you really need to do is place a sign there before the entrance to this little spot here, and place a water bucket on the block above that, like so. The sign should contain the water, and what the water will do is slow down your fall as soon as you drop through it. You don't need to hold any buttons, you don't need to be holding space or anything like that, but then it will basically negate all of the fall damage and reset the fall damage that you would take, meaning that all you have to do is fall these last 3 blocks, that sign will keep the water in, and you won't take any fall damage. Let me demonstrate that, because some of you guys may not be familiar with this tactic at all, and let me just quickly drop off some of this stuff so I can collect some of the items. Right, here we are back up at the top here. This is our entrance to our skeleton spawner. All we need to do is take that leap of faith, drop down into the water, and as you can see, we just fell probably about 40 blocks, maybe? I think we're at Y19 here from sea level at about Y63. We fell that entire distance and took no fall damage thanks to this single block of water and this sign holding it back. So there you go. That is 2 ways you can use water to get in and out of places like this very, very easily. Back up here on the surface, it's probably going to be a good idea to signpost where exactly the spawner is, because it's a little bit subtle right now. The entrance is not looking like much, and even though we should know where it is based on the location from this portal, I have a tendency to forget these things if I'm not too careful. So I'm probably going to put a few logs up in here, and maybe we could make some bone blocks out of these bones, because bone blocks are not a thing we've had the luxury of making elsewhere in this series. So if you break some bones down into bone meal, you get 3 bone meal per bone, and 9 bone meal in a 3x3 crafting grid makes one of these. These are bone blocks, and you will find these occurring naturally in the world underground in some areas where fossils are buried. But generally speaking, those are quite difficult to come across. You don't tend to see them naturally all that much, and so it's usually more likely that you will make bone blocks yourself. Some folks pointed out in the video I made about choosing materials for your builds that bone blocks actually make a really nice medieval wall texture because they're kind of flat and they don't have too much texture to them, but they do have a very slight kind of darkening of them around the sides there. There's kind of like, there's a glow in the middle and then darker areas around the sides, which can look really nice when you use it as a wall. And I definitely agree with that. I think those blocks actually look pretty great, but we could probably make a few more of them over here. There you go. You can see that as an example. Quite a nice looking medieval wall. Obviously it's not connected to anything yet, and I don't know if I plan to connect it to anything right now, but as you can see, between the dark oak logs, it really doesn't look all that bad. And it occurs to me that in making the spawner down there, making this entrance and so forth, I've actually used up pretty much all of the dark oak I harvested before we came down here. Like, these 8 logs are the only stuff I've got left from the dark oak farm that I was setting up over here with all of these saplings. And there's my original tunnel down, which we'll probably close off at some point. But for now, I think it's probably time to head back to the base, because now I have a decent source of bones. I have enough bone meal to grow all of these dark oak trees at home nice and quickly, so our tree farming operation just got a whole lot easier. And with all the bones we brought back from the skeleton farm, we have 2.5 stacks of bone blocks, which is actually a great amount and would be not too bad for a build. But today, we're actually going to use it for a couple of other things. The tree farming setup is not the only thing that we need this bone meal for. In fact, we can use this bone meal to acquire a whole bunch of dyes. If you remember in the last episode, I mentioned that grabbing those rose bushes from the cave was a good idea. We've actually already got one out here in front of the house, but you may remember that being able to bone meal these 2 high flowers gives you a whole bunch more, which you can then convert into dye. And in fact, these are the best things to convert into dye because each one will give you 2 dye instead of just 1 that you would normally get from one of the red flowers that grows naturally around here, one of the poppies. There are actually 3 others of these 2-block tall flowers, and we don't seem to have any in here right now. There are lilacs, peonies, and sunflowers, which we can use to get a variety of other dyes. Now let's see if we can go out and find some in our local area. I have a feeling the forest over here might be a good place to start. Yep, immediately there is a full field of lilacs, so let's take a couple of those. And these are actually the ones that you get magenta dye from. So if we just take a couple of these back, we should be able to bone meal them en masse and get as much magenta dye as we could want. Let's see in the forest around here if there are any other peonies lurking in the trees. There we go, got some peonies as well. And if I remember correctly, yes, these guys make pink dye. Fantastic stuff. Now, the last one is a sunflower, which occurs in sunflower plains biomes, which can be a little bit tricky to find, but I have a feeling we've probably got 1 or 2 around here. Here we go. And sunflowers can be a little bit tricky to spot because from the back, they don't look like all that much. They're actually quite well camouflaged if you look at them from the air, but from this side they always face east. So if you're heading west, you'll probably see the heads of these quite clearly. We'll take a few of those home, and these are a source of yellow dye, which you can already get from dandelions, but it's just nice to have something that you can bone meal and get an absolute ton of later. Now, by simply planting these flowers out of the back of our house and spamming them with bone meal, we can get a ton of flowers which we can convert into a few different colors of dye. But unfortunately, these flowers aren't enough to create the full range of dye colors. So that's something we can go into a little bit more right now. There are 16 colors of dye in Minecraft, and at present, not all of them can be acquired through flowers. That is actually about to change because there are a few colors that you'll be able to get from flowers in the next update, Minecraft 1.14. But as of 1.13, there are a few things that you absolutely have to get from other sources. For example, black dye can only be acquired through ink sacs, which you get from squids, and that is also the way that you make grey and light grey dye. Alternatively, some of the flowers will actually give you grey and light grey. For example, the Oxeye Daisy and Azure Bluet here will both give you a light grey dye. But since those aren't flowers that you can spam with bone meal, you actually have to go out and farm them out in the world. You have to bone meal some grass, hope that they grow, and gather them. And there are fun ways of doing that in an automated fashion, which we're not going to get to in today's episode, but it's something we can explore in future. Now, as I've mentioned, cactus green is required to dye anything green, and that includes lime green. So by combining bone meal, which is the white dye, and cactus green, you get yourself some lime green. The cactus green can be used to dye things in its own right. We also have cocoa beans, which if you remember, you have to grow on jungle wood, but can also be bone mealed repeatedly to grow them quicker, so that's actually relatively simple to do now. And the key to unlocking the rest of the dyes is lapis lazuli, which is the blue dye, but it can also be used to make cyan and light blue dye. To get cyan dye, you mix lapis lazuli and cactus green, getting you 2 cyan dye. And cyan is one of the cooler colors in the game, in my opinion, so I think that's probably worth investigating. You can also get light blue by combining lapis and bone meal. Now, you might think lapis lazuli is kind of difficult to get hold of, and for the most part it is. You need to go mining for it, you can fortune it to get a whole bunch, but even so, you also use it for enchanting, so it might be a bit of a pain to sacrifice all of that lapis in favor of just dyeing some stuff. But don't worry, because if you have a villager setup, if you have a villager trading setup anywhere, if you have a priest you can trade with, they actually trade you lapis lazuli. Now, in this case, this one is trading me 1 lapis for 1 emerald, which isn't much. Once you've got a decent way of farming emeralds, either through a librarian for a paper trade or through a farmer with crops, then you'll probably be able to acquire lapis in large enough quantities that means you don't need to go mining for it. And personally, I've got a stack of lapis lazuli blocks just from what I've been able to mine, and we've still got some ore left over here, which we could probably get a ton out of for blue dye. So generally speaking, once you're a little bit further advanced in the game, it's not that much of a hassle. Lapis is also required to make purple dye using rose red and lapis lazuli. It's also used to make magenta if you don't have any lilacs, because you can still make it using a lapis lazuli to red and a bone meal. And remember that once you've made yellow dye, you can combine red and yellow to make orange. So you've actually got the full range of dyes just with a few of these plants. In swamps, you'll find these blue orchid flowers like the one I put outside my window here, which can be turned into light blue anytime, meaning that if you want to farm a bunch of light blue dye and you don't feel like wasting your lapis, you can always head over to a swamp. In Minecraft 1.14, you'll actually be able to farm blue dye from cornflowers as well, although lapis lazuli will still convert into blue dye if you place it in a crafting table. Now, I'm actually going to start organizing some of the flowers and some of the dyes in these 2 chests here. So we've got flowers on the left and dyes here on the right. And one last crafting recipe to share, you can actually make magenta dye by combining pink and purple dye in a crafting table. That recipe just won't pop up until you have them all in your inventory. So that, in brief, is all the dyes in Minecraft, and you can use each of these to create an incredibly colorful display in a chest, for one thing, but also to create all different colors of wool and concrete and anything else that you can dye with these colors. Now, one last thing to cover before we wrap up today's episode, it's actually possible to automate the growing and collection of these 2 tall flowers using a dispenser. Put some bone meal into a dispenser and activate it using a redstone signal, and it will actually bone meal the flower itself, popping off another identical flower. Naturally, if you're just standing here doing this with a lever, it can get a little bit tiresome, and it's not going to do a bunch of flowers at once for you. So one of the things you can do is set up a redstone clock, which is very simple to do using 2 observers facing into each other like so. That's actually going to start a clock which will just keep ticking redstone until it has run out of bone meal in this dispenser, which it will do very fast. Unfortunately, once this clock is on, it's not going to turn off by itself, and that dispenser will continue making this terrible ticking noise. So one of the things you might want to do is add a sticky piston underneath one of these 2 observers, facing upward like so, and then activate it with a lever anytime you want to turn it off, which will just push the observer up out of the circuit, and then each time you bring it back down, the dispenser will continue ticking like so. It actually works a little bit faster if you pull it back in here with a sticky piston. You'll see that's actually moving a little bit faster than it was before. Set up one of these circuits behind each of your 2 tall flowers, and essentially you've got a mass production farm for pink, magenta, red, yellow, and in fact orange dyes, because you can always combine the red and yellow if you want to. Of course, that's going to require quite a lot of bone meal, but now we've got a skeleton farm, it should be pretty easy. But that's going to do it for today, folks. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Minecraft Survival Guide. My name has been Pixlriffs. Don't forget to leave a like on this episode if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.